Right after divorcing me, my husband didn't just throw me out of the house. He tossed all my belongings onto the lawn like garbage and called my parents with the phone on speaker. Come pick up your worthless daughter right now. I already divorced her.
She's dead weight.
I don't want to see her in my house for 1 second longer. He spat the words out with a coldness that froze my blood. 15 minutes later, my father, Elijah Hayes, rolled up in his luxury car, flanked by 3 security guards. This house is in my daughter's name, Marcus. You are the one leaving, or I'll break your legs. My father roared, which made my ex-husband, Marcus Wallace, who had been so arrogant just minutes before, drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. From that day on, I swore that he would regret this and suffer. But before I tell you my story in this internet video, please write in the comments what city you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel keeps growing and I can bring you even more thrilling stories. It all started with the slam of the front door, shut with such force that the walls of the house vibrated. I, Simone, was sitting on the living room sofa, checking my phone, and jumped from the shock. My heart started pounding when I saw Marcus enter, his face red with rage. There was no greeting, not even the tired smile he used to give me when he came home from his job in the early years of our marriage. There was only a cold, wild look, as abruptly, not to hit me, but to throw a thick brown envelope right at my face. The hard edge of the envelope cut my cheek, leaving a stinging pain. However, the physical pain was nothing compared to the sharp ache I felt in my chest when the envelope fell onto my lap and I saw the county court seal. I stared at the envelope, my hands trembling, and looked up at Marcus, who stood with his arms crossed and his breath coming fast. I hadn't even managed to ask what all this meant when he started shouting with a voice that echoed through the entire living room. I'm sick of looking at your face in this house. Those are the divorce papers. Sign them right now and get out of my sight. You are no longer my wife, Simone. He thundered as if dictating a sentence. His words sliced through my chest like a shower of needles. Swallowing with difficulty, I tried to find a trace of logic amid that sudden storm. Just that morning, he had said goodbye to me with the usual routine on his way to work. It was true he had been distant and colder for months, but I never imagined that coldness had grown into hate. I rose, stumbling, trying to grab his arm to beg for an explanation, to understand what had happened. But Marcus pushed me away with a swift shove that sent me tumbling back onto the sofa. He looked down at me with a gesture of pure disdain, as if I were a smudge of dirt on his expensive shoes. He started pacing back and forth across the room, pointing a finger at me as he spoke louder and louder. I don't need a woman like you. You know nothing about high-level business or the high life. I'm a successful entrepreneur. My company is breaking profit records. I deserve someone on my level, not a boring housewife who only knows how to stay inside these 4 walls. He spat, proud of himself, listing his accomplishments, the contracts he had closed, the extraordinary profits that, according to him, he had achieved solely through his own effort. I listened in silence, tears streaming down my cheeks, not because I was weak, but because I couldn't believe the man I had helped lift from nothing had become a monster incapable of remembering the past. He seemed to have completely forgotten who gave him the initial capital, who introduced him to his first important partners, who supported him emotionally when he was on the brink of bankruptcy. All of that, according to his narrative, had never happened. Marcus, impatient to see that I was only crying, spun around and marched into the primary bedroom. I started hearing drawers being yanked open, closet doors slamming, and objects crashing onto the floor. I walked to the room's threshold with uncertain steps and found a scene that chilled my soul. He was tearing my clothes out of the closet with irrational fury. He wasn't folding or packing anything into suitcases, as someone who at least respected our shared years might do. He had brought out enormous black plastic trash bags and was stuffing my dresses, blouses, and coats into them, shoving everything carelessly. He swept my cosmetics, books, and personal items off the dresser with his forearm, throwing them abruptly into another bag, mixed together like refuse. I lunged at him, grabbed his arm, and pleaded with him to calm down, to talk like adults, to explain what was happening. He pushed me against the wall so hard that I felt the impact in my shoulder. "I don't want your things dirtying up my expensive closet," he sneered. "Soon, this closet will be full of designer clothes for a real woman, a classy woman. Not like you." And then he spoke a name that pierced me like a knife.
Kendra.
In that instant, everything made sense. The late-night work outings. The deleted messages. The mood swings. It wasn't just that he was tired of me. He already had someone else. My memories. Our history. The house we had shared. Everything had been replaced by an outside fantasy. When he finished stuffing almost my entire life into several black bags, Marcus dragged them down the hallway without caring about the thumps against the walls. I followed him, crying in silence. He flung the front door wide open and threw the bags out onto the front lawn. I heard them hit the grass and pavement with a dull, humiliating thud. I knew some neighbors might be watching the scene from their windows, but he didn't care about the embarrassment at all. For Marcus, the urgent thing was to get me out of his life as soon as possible, to start a new one with Kendra in the house he considered his trophy. He turned toward me, still standing paralyzed in the doorway, and smiled cruelly. He took his cell phone from his pocket and calmly unlocked it, as if he were about to do something fun. He dialed a number and turned on the speakerphone so I could hear every word. We listened to several rings before a deep voice, that of an older man, answered on the other side. It was my father, Elijah Hayes. Without a greeting or the slightest respect, Marcus began to spew insults. "Come pick up this useless trash right now. I divorced your daughter. She's good for nothing as a wife.
All she knows how to do is spend my money and be a burden.
I never want to see her in my house again. Get here fast, and take her before I call the sanitation service to haul her away with the other trash bags," he said with a tone so cruel that I had to cover my mouth to choke back a sob. On the other end of the line, there was a heavy silence. Before my father could even answer, Marcus hung up. He let out a self-satisfied chuckle, convinced he'd won. He glanced at his high-end watch and gave me a menacing look. He gave me 15 minutes. If my parents didn't show up in 15 minutes, he'd drag me to the main road and leave me stranded by the side of the highway. I stared at him, and the sadness that was suffocating me began to mix with a deep pity. Pity for him. Marcus had no idea who he was messing with. I had chosen to live simply, deliberately concealing the true extent of my family's wealth, so as not to wound his male pride. I wanted him to feel successful through his own effort, not like a kept man of his rich in-laws. His own effort, not like a kept man of his rich in-laws. But that afternoon, he was tearing down the veil that had protected him for so long. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I walked slowly to the bags on the lawn and stood next to them, waiting. I wasn't going to respond to violence with more shouting. It wasn't necessary. I knew that in a few minutes, life would take care of giving him the biggest lesson he had ever received. Marcus, seeing me silent, believed I was defeated and terrified. Walked out onto the patio and slumped into a chair like a despotic king watching over his slave, counting the minutes with arrogance. For him, those 15 minutes felt endless because he was anxious to finish humiliating me. In contrast, the atmosphere around the house became charged with an inexplicable tension, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Marcus was about to get up to carry out his threat to drag me into the street when we heard the sound of a smooth but powerful engine approaching. It wasn't the usual noise of just any car, but the contained roar of a high-performance luxury vehicle. A black sedan, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, shining like a mirror, pulled up to the open gate. Rolls-Royce Ghost, shining like a mirror, pulled up to the open gate. Trailing it were two enormous black SUVs, likely Cadillac Escalades, which blocked street access as an escort. Marcus frowned in confusion at the sight of that small luxury convoy. He didn't remember having such ostentatious partners. The gate, which was already wide open, let the sedan pass, and it slowly advanced to the entrance. It did this under my serene gaze and his stunned stare. I lowered my head. I knew perfectly well who had arrived. The rear door of the sedan opened, and a middle-aged man with a firm stride stepped out. His face was hard. His clenched jaw held fierce anger. It was my father, Elijah Hayes, but his appearance had nothing to do with the man in the simple shirt Marcus had seen at our family gatherings. He was wearing a flawless, bespoke suit that radiated power and authority. 6 muscular men in black suits stepped out of the SUVs. Among them was Darius, our family's trusted head of security, with eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Marcus, who had initially frozen, tried to hide his nervousness by adopting his haughty pose again. He thought my father was just coming to impress or intimidate, nothing more. He walked down the porch steps with his chest puffed out, trying to stand tall. He convinced himself that this was still his house's territory and that he could order whomever he wanted around. Meanwhile, my father approached me first, gently held my face, saw the cut on my cheek and the trembling in my hands. His eyes darkened. "Good thing you got here on time, Mr. Hayes. Take your daughter. I'm tired of supporting her, and don't expect a single cent of the marital assets. Everything in this house and the company is the fruit of my sweat." Simone didn't contribute anything. Marcus shouted deliberately, so the neighbors peeking from behind their curtains could hear him. My father didn't lower himself to argue with him. He simply signaled Darius to accompany me to the sedan and keep me safe. Only when he saw me sitting in the car, protected, did he turn toward Marcus. His gaze was icy, so penetrating that Marcus involuntarily took a step back, intimidated by his imposing presence. Trying to regain control, Marcus raised his voice. "You have no right to enter my house without my permission. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police," he yelled, pointing at the gate as if dismissing a beggar. My father let out a short, dry laugh with no trace of humor. He pulled a manila folder from inside his jacket and threw it at Marcus's chest, exactly as Marcus had thrown the divorce papers at mine minutes earlier. Marcus caught the folder with trembling hands and started looking through the contents. His eyes widened as he read the documents. It was the original deed to the house they lived in. And there, in clear letters, was the name of the sole legal owner of the land and the structure, Simone Hayes, daughter of Elijah. "This house is mine. It's in my daughter's name," my father boomed. "You're the one who needs to pick up your feet and get out right now, or I'll break them myself." My father's voice echoed throughout the neighborhood, far more intimidating than any of Marcus's tantrums. Marcus's world collapsed in a second. He felt his knees give way. He had never seen the house deed. He had always assumed I kept it in the safe with other documents. Now he discovered that the property had been a wedding gift for my father from the start, but in my name. And if the house wasn't his mind started frantically calculating about the company. Cold sweat ran down his temples as he remembered that the initial capital for his company had come from a mysterious investor I had introduced him to. He suddenly understood that his entire castle of success was built upon my family's money and connections. All his arrogance instantly vanished, as if it had never existed. His face turned pale, his features crumpled. It was as if he had suddenly realized he had awakened a sleeping lion. Without thinking, Marcus fell to his knees in front of my father. He leaned down to clutch his legs, crying crocodile tears. "Please, father-in-law, I was upset. I didn't mean that. Forgive me. I beg you. Give me another chance. I'll fix things with Simone," he sobbed, clinging to him desperately. My father looked at the crown of his son-in-law's head with a gesture of disgust. He gave him a slight kick in the shoulder to make him let go. "The opportunity ended the day you called my daughter trash. That day, you dug your own grave. I don't need apologies from a man who doesn't respect women," he said with a firm, cutting calm. He raised his hand and made a gesture. Darius strode forward, grabbed the back of Marcus's shirt collar, and lifted him as if he were a scrawny kitten. Marcus writhed, trying to cling to the pillars of the entrance, shouting my name at the top of his lungs, hoping that, as always, I would come out to defend him. But the tinted windows of the sedan remained closed. I didn't get out. My heart had closed, too. Darius and another bodyguard dragged him out of the yard without much delicacy. Marcus tried to grab the gate, but the men's strength was far superior. They abruptly dropped him onto the asphalt in front of the house. He scraped his elbows and knees on the pavement. He was only wearing the clothes on his back. His wallet and phone had been forgotten on the patio table. When he tried to approach the house again, Darius blocked his path with a steady look. My father stood in the gate's doorway, looking down at him, and announced in a clear voice that, from that day on, Marcus was forbidden from approaching me or any family property within a radius of 300 feet. If he dared to violate that order, he wouldn't hesitate to use tougher methods. Then the gate slammed shut with a metallic click in front of Marcus's face. The sound of the key turning sounded like a sentence on his future. Marcus struggled to his feet. He stood swaying by the sidewalk while a few neighbors watched him over their fences, whispering and pointing. His pride was shattered. Just then, a red sedan pulled up near him. It was Kendra's car. Marcus smiled in relief. At least he still had the woman who understood him. He rushed to the car and enthusiastically tapped the window. The window only lowered a few inches. From behind her dark sunglasses, Kendra looked at him with a strange expression, evaluating his dirty, disheveled, and humiliated appearance. Marcus asked her to open the door, take him away from there, and start a new life together. She, instead, asked him with a suspicious voice what had happened, why they had thrown him out of his wife's house, and where the luxury car he always boasted about was. Marcus stammered, unable to give a coherent explanation. Seeing the confusion in his eyes and realizing that he had probably just lost everything, Kendra rolled the window back up without saying a word. The red car sped away, leaving Marcus alone on the side of the street, enveloped in dust and the beginning of a regret that was just starting to set in. Meanwhile, a dense but strangely comforting silence reigned inside the black sedan in which we rode. I was in the back seat with my head resting on my mother, Olivia Hayes' shoulder. With my head resting on my mother, Olivia Hayes' shoulder. She didn't stop caressing my arm with tenderness. My tears had dried, giving way to an empty gaze that was slowly beginning to fill with a new strength. My father occupied the passenger seat and occasionally checked the rearview mirror to make sure I was okay. He knew how much all of this hurt me, but he also knew that beneath my apparent softness, the same strength of character that he had always possessed was beating. Upon arriving at my parents' house, a mansion much more imposing than the one we had just left, I asked my father's assistant for a new phone because mine had been left in the purse Marcus had thrown into the yard. The first thing I did wasn't to lock myself in my room to cry, but to call the bank and the team that managed the family assets. In a calm but firm voice, I gave precise instructions to block all the financial services Marcus had enjoyed until that moment, thanks to me. Unlimited credit cards, access to shared accounts, high-end cars, registered under family companies. I ordered that everything be frozen immediately. I wanted Marcus to feel firsthand what it meant to live without the financial cushion he had despised for years. My mother watched me with a mixture of sadness and pride, the strong, clear-headed Simone from before the marriage was back. While I was regaining control of my life, Marcus wandered through the city with dragging steps. The sun was beginning to set, and his stomach was burning with hunger. He rummaged through his pants pocket and found a nearly empty wallet, a few crumpled bills, and a row of platinum credit cards that had always been his pride. He forced himself to believe that everything that had happened was just a tantrum from his father-in-law, that my family would eventually relent, and that I would end up begging for a reconciliation the next morning. Clinging to that illusion, he entered a luxury downtown hotel not far away. He wanted to spend the night there, relax with room service, and think about his next moves while taking a hot shower. His somewhat dirty and disheveled appearance made the receptionist look at him with skepticism, but he responded by arrogantly tossing his main credit card onto the marble counter. She ran it through the reader and frowned. She tried again. Then she shook her head with an uncomfortable smile. She politely informed him that the transaction had been declined. Marcus scoffed, indignant, convinced that the terminal was faulty. He pulled out a second card, then a third. The result was identical. All of them, from the most prestigious bank to the most exclusive, were rejected. Marcus's face flushed, not so much from anger as from embarrassment. The line of guests waiting behind him started looking and whispering. Finally, the receptionist returned the handful of cards and told him that if he wanted a room, he would have to pay in cash or leave. Marcus didn't have enough money to pay the deposit for such an expensive hotel. He collected his cards with trembling hands and left the establishment under the quiet rain of the staff's disdainful glances. Night fell, and the air turned cold. Marcus wandered for hours until he found a relatively quiet park. There was no mattress, no air conditioning, no soft sheets. Just a hard wooden bench with chipped paint. Mosquitoes began to buzz around him, biting his hands, neck, and legs. He could barely sleep, curled up like a homeless man, the very kind of person he had always looked down upon. Curled up like a homeless man, the very kind of person he had always looked down upon. Dawn woke him up with sun rays hitting his face directly. Every muscle ached. His neck was stiff. He felt sticky and dirty. People exercising in the morning looked at him with disgust. Some covered their noses as they passed. Marcus jumped up, dusted off his wrinkled clothes, and tried to recompose his dignity. He entered a nearby corner store, bought a bottle of water, and asked to leave his phone plugged in for a few minutes to charge it. When he finally turned on his phone, he started receiving an avalanche of notifications. One of them was an email with a red exclamation point. He opened it with a pounding heart. The subject read, "Notification of termination and removal from CEO position for cause." Blood rushed to his head. He threw the plastic cup he had just emptied onto the floor, splashing the ground and provoking a complaint from the store owner. He didn't care. All he could think was that this had gone too far. How could they fire him from the company he had built? He was convinced it was another maneuver by my father, manipulating the board of directors. With the little money left in his wallet, he flagged down a cab. He had to go to the office immediately. He planned to storm the Human Resources Department, shout at the board members, and demand a severance package of several $100,000 if they truly intended to fire him. The cab stopped in front of the corporate building, a sleek skyscraper in the heart of downtown Atlanta. Marcus strode out, ignoring his appearance, the wrinkled shirt, the dirt-stained pants, the greasy, unshaven face. When he tried to pass through the lobby's revolving doors, two burly security guards stopped him. They were the same men who used to greet him with respect every morning. This time, they blocked his way with firm expressions. They told him he was forbidden entry. Marcus exploded in shouts in front of the lobby, which was crowded with employees coming in to work. "Have you lost your minds? Don't you recognize me? I'm your CEO," he bellowed, trying to break free from the hands that held him. The commotion drew general attention. Many employees who used to lower their heads when they saw him now gathered at a distance, whispering and looking at him with a mixture of curiosity, pity, and repulsion. Marcus kept shouting that he was the boss, that he would fire anyone who dared to stand in his way, failing to understand that his authority had evaporated. In the midst of that chaos, the lobby suddenly fell silent. The automatic doors swung wide open. A group of elegantly dressed people entered from the official car drop-off area, walking in unison. At the front was a woman whose stride was firm and graceful, yet radiated an imposing authority. It was me. Not the Simone in a bathrobe with a tired face that Marcus knew, but a different version of myself. I wore a flawless business suit, a simple blouse, a carefully placed scarf that framed my face, and heels that clicked a determined rhythm on the marble floor. Behind me walked the board members and several prestigious lawyers, the ones Marcus used to fear in meetings. Everyone maintained a step slightly behind mine, making the hierarchy clear. Marcus was speechless. Making the hierarchy clear. Marcus was speechless. The words got stuck in his throat. He watched me advance, seemingly not noticing his presence, looking straight ahead with a serene expression. Just as he thought I would simply ignore him, he broke the silence. "Simone." He yelled my name in a hoarse voice, trying to break the security barrier that restrained him. I stopped. I didn't turn completely, only slightly tilted my head. That movement was enough for the entire lobby to hold its breath. Marcus took advantage of the moment. He started demanding explanations, shouting, asking why he had been fired, claiming he had a right to the company due to his effort over the last 5 years. He accused me and my family of acting illegally, of snatching away what was his. This time, I turned around fully. I looked him up and down with a neutral expression, as if I were observing some random object, not a man I had once loved. Then I spoke in a clear voice, perfectly audible throughout the silent lobby. You're forgetting something basic, Marcus. All the capital, shares, and assets of this company belong to my family. You were hired as a trusted employee to manage it. You used that trust for your own benefit, to enrich yourself at the company's expense, I said, without needing to raise my tone. I added that the audit team was uncovering all the fund diversions he had made and that the criminal complaint was already underway. Marcus froze. He felt the eyes of everyone present pinned on him. There was no longer admiration, only disbelief and contempt. He tried to open his mouth to defend himself, but he couldn't find the words. I didn't wait any longer. I looked back at the building's head of security, who was standing rigid beside me. Mister, I asked coolly, why is there a dirty, loud stranger in the lobby of my company? Take him to the dumpster. That's where he belongs. Don't let him disturb the peace of my employees. After saying that, I continued my path toward the private executive elevator. The door closed in front of Marcus, who was still struggling with the guards. They, obediently, stopped holding him carefully and began to drag him unceremoniously out of the building. They pulled him out through the revolving door, took him down the exterior stairs, and threw him onto the hot sidewalk. His briefcase was tossed behind him, landing in a puddle of dirty water. Marcus sat up, looking at the skyscraper he had recently considered his kingdom, realizing that access to his life of luxury had just been closed forever. With his dignity in shreds, Marcus stumbled away from the building. The only name that came to mind as a possible salvation was Kendra's, the woman he believed he loved, the one who, according to him, understood him better than anyone, the reason he had dared to divorce me. He was sure she wouldn't let him suffer. Hadn't they promised each other love? He took another cab with the little cash he had left, heading for the luxury apartment where Kendra lived. That apartment was a testament to his love. He had rented it for years for an exorbitant sum, using company money that he had disguised in the budgets. In the building's lobby, the receptionists recognized his face and let him pass without too many questions, although they looked at his disheveled appearance with concern. In the elevator, as he ascended to the 20th floor, Marcus mentally rehearsed what he would tell her. That my family had betrayed him, that he was the victim of an injustice, that he needed refuge. He imagined they could start from scratch together, perhaps by selling some jewelry he had bought her. The elevator door opened, and Marcus walked quickly to door 205. He pressed the doorbell over and over. No one answered. He tried the digital code he had always used. A long error beep sounded. Access denied. He tried again, and again with the same result. Sweat ran down his forehead. He started pounding on the door and calling Kendra's name. After several minutes, the door cracked open slightly. Kendra's face appeared in the gap, serious, without the doting smile with which she usually greeted him. The security chain was still on, as if he were a potentially dangerous stranger. She looked immaculate, dressed as if ready for a long trip. Behind her, Marcus could glimpse several large suitcases lined up in the living room. Honey, why did you change the code? Why is the chain on? Open up, please. I need to rest. I've had a terrible day, he pleaded, trying to take her hand through the small opening. Kendra pulled her hand away abruptly, examining him from head to toe with open disgust. She laughed, a soft but cruel laugh. She asked him why he was there, if he wasn't aware that all of Atlanta already knew he had been thrown out of his wife's house and fired from the company. The news traveled lightning fast in the socialite and business gossip circles, and she was very well connected. Marcus froze, realizing she already had all the information. He tried to justify himself. He said it was temporary, that he would recover what was his, and that they would live happily ever after. He asked her to at least let him in to shower and eat something. He reminded her of all the sacrifices he had made for her love, including the divorce. Kendra unhooked the chain, and Marcus smiled, thinking her heart had softened. But instead of letting him in, she stepped out into the hallway with a small suitcase in her hand and closed the apartment door behind her. She crossed her arms in front of him, looking at him coldly. "Listen closely, Marcus. Don't dream while you're awake. Did you really think I would be with a much older man like you out of the goodness of my heart? I was with you for your money, and your money is gone. What good are you to me now?" She said flatly. "This lease is up tomorrow, and I'm not going to pay for it with my money. All the designer bags, jewelry, and luxuries you bought me, I sold them all this morning. That's my capital to start over in another city." Marcus was aghast. The sweet woman he had idealized was, in fact, just someone who had used him. Rage took over. He grabbed her shoulders and shook her, yelling that she was an ingrate, demanding that she give him back the money and the things. His screams caused neighbors in the adjacent doors to peek out. One of them threatened to call security. Kendra calmly broke free, stepped back, and opened her purse. She pulled out a thick envelope and slapped it against his chest. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers, inflated project invoices, and company fund movements to personal accounts in Marcus's name. He recognized, horrified, documents he thought were locked away securely. Kendra had quietly compiled proof of his corruption as her personal insurance. "Your ex-wife and her lawyers must already have everything. Keep those copies as a souvenir. Now get lost before I start shouting, 'Thief,'" she threatened. Marcus lost all strength. His legs trembled. He finally understood that he was completely alone. The honest woman who had loved him had scorned him, and the mistress for whom he had risked everything was a viper. Kendra turned around, dragging her suitcase toward the elevator, and left him collapsed there in the hallway. Marcus exited the building like a dead man walking. He had no money left for another cab. He wandered aimlessly through the streets bathed in the afternoon sun. Hunger made his stomach rumble, his throat was dry, and the thought of jail, increasingly real, hammered at his temples. While he wandered, the atmosphere at my family's company headquarters was intense, but controlled. In the glass boardroom, I sat at the head of a long table while external auditors and lawyers presented the results of their investigation. The screen displayed charts and graphs showing the magnitude of the financial damage caused by Marcus's management. I listened attentively, without shedding a single tear. There was no room left for nostalgia, only for justice. The head of the audit team explained that Marcus had systematically diverted funds for 3 years. His methods ranged from fake supplier invoices to inflating budgets for non-existent purchases and using corporate cards for extravagant personal expenses, luxury apartment rentals, designer bags, jewelry costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, all completely unrelated to the business operations. I nodded slowly. I had suspected it, but seeing the proof still hurt. I gave the lawyers the order to pursue the case through criminal court to the fullest extent. I wanted Marcus to answer for every dollar he had stolen. Elsewhere in the city, Marcus was hunched over a table at a small roadside diner. He had finished a plate of cheap rice and stew, paid for with the last few coins he found in his jacket pocket. His appearance was far from that of a CEO. The dirty shirt, the messy hair, the dull face. He stared at the street blankly, lost in thought. The other customers watched him sideways, intrigued. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens broke through the traffic noise. Marcus flinched, his heart raced. He tried to convince himself they were going somewhere else, that it had nothing to do with him, but his instinct told him otherwise. 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the diner. Blue lights flashed over the tables. Several uniformed officers quickly got out, accompanied by some men in plain clothes, whom Marcus recognized as investigators. He tried to get up and flee through the back door, but he tripped over a table leg and fell to the floor. Before he could get up, strong hands grabbed his arms, twisted them behind his back, and pressed his face against the sticky table. The metallic click of handcuffs closing cut off his breath. The diners stirred. Many pulled out their phones to record the scene. Marcus tried to hide his face, ashamed to the bone. One of the officers read him his rights and the warrant for his arrest on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and falsification of documents. He couldn't respond. They practically carried him out of the diner and put him in one of the patrol cars under the incessant glare of curious onlookers' cameras. The video of his arrest began circulating that same day on social media with cruel titles: "Arrogant ex-CEO arrested while eating at a diner." At the precinct, they locked him in a cold, dreary interrogation, sitting there, hands cuffed to the table. He had too much time for panic to consume him. Hands cuffed to the table. He had too much time for panic to consume him. When the investigator finally entered and spread the thick file of evidence in front of him, Marcus knew there was no escape. There were transfers, security camera footage, and testimonies from finance employees. The possibility of jail time easily added up to more than 10 years. Desperate, he requested to exercise his right to a phone call. With his wrists still cuffed, he dialed the number his fingers knew by heart.
Mine.
He prayed that deep down, some compassion remained in me. That perhaps I would withdraw the complaint because of the memories we shared. He heard it ring once, twice, 3 times. "Hello, good afternoon," answered a woman's voice that wasn't mine, formal and firm. Marcus recognized the voice of my personal assistant. His voice cracking with tears, he begged her to pass me the phone. He shouted that he had been arrested and needed my help. He pleaded for her to at least notify me. On the other end, there was a brief silence. Then my assistant replied politely, but with a cutting harshness. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wallace. Ms. Hayes cannot take your call. She is presiding over an important meeting for the acquisition of a company that was once your competition. She instructed me that all matters concerning you are now in the hands of the legal team. She wishes you well in your legal process. Good afternoon." The line cut off. Marcus stared at the dangling receiver, unable to understand. The phone slipped from his fingers and swung from its cord. His last hope vanished. I was no longer the docile wife he could manipulate. I was someone who had risen far beyond his reach. A scream of pain escaped his chest, echoing through the precinct hallways, a cry of useless, belated repentance. The judicial process moved with a slowness that was torture for Marcus. After several rounds of physically and mentally exhausting interrogations, he was granted a restricted release as a defendant in the city while the case proceeded. But that freedom was a mirage. The courts and banks moved quickly. All his properties were seized to cover damages to the company and his own debts. The rented apartment was sealed. The cars he hadn't finished paying for were repossessed by the finance companies. His bank accounts were frozen until they hit zero. He walked out of the precinct in the same ragged clothes he was wearing, carrying a plastic bag with a few worthless belongings. No prestigious lawyer wanted to continue representing him without payment, and the assigned public defender seemed resigned to losing the case from the start. The outside world seemed even crueler than the cell. The Atlantis sun beat down mercilessly, melting the last remnants of his pride. He walked along the crowded sidewalks like just another stranger, stomach empty and feet heavy, carrying an invisible weight of guilt and shame. He began to realize that he had become part of the group of people he had always ignored, those who live on the margins, invisible to the city's glamour. He sought refuge under a pedestrian bridge. He sat down, leaning his back against a cold column, hugging his knees, hiding his face from the dust and others' gazes. Hunger forced him to abandon the little modesty he had left. He approached a small diner, hoping they would give him some leftovers, but the owner chased him away without even listening. His smell and dirty clothes caused immediate rejection. Without resources, he ended up picking up an empty plastic bottle from a trash can, filling it with tap water from a public bathroom, and drinking it in large gulps to soothe his parched throat. The water tasted metallic, but he had no alternative. As he swallowed, tears mixed with the sweat and dust on his face, he remembered how, not long ago, he would order imported, extremely expensive bottled water in luxury restaurants without even checking the price. The contrast tightened his chest like a fist. As evening fell, he reached a large intersection downtown and stopped dead in his tracks. A huge billboard dominated the facade of a skyscraper. There in high definition was my face. I looked radiant in a formal, elegant, and discreet suit. The transmission showed a press conference where I was presenting a new line of business in alliance with foreign investors. I was smiling, speaking with confidence. My eyes shone with intelligence and determination. A headline flashed on the screen: "Inspiring figure rises to lead the global market." Marcus stood rooted to the sidewalk, looking up with his mouth slightly open. In the recording, a reporter asked me the secret to my success. I replied that the key was honesty, hard work, and the ability to cut all toxic elements that hinder growth out of one's life. Every word hit him like a slap. He had no doubt who that toxic element was. Next to me, a handsome young man looked at me with respect. He was my new business partner, about whom there was talk of a special closeness between us. Seeing that complicity on the screen, Marcus felt a devastating pang of jealousy, but he also knew he no longer had any right to claim anything. He was nothing more than a speck of dust beneath the feet of the woman he had scorned. He lowered his gaze, unable to continue watching. He walked away from the intersection, and his thoughts drifted to his parents, who lived, perhaps, just perhaps, they would still take him in. With the last of his strength, he walked for miles to the bus terminal, intending to sneak onto some cheap coach to return to his parents' house. However, reality struck him before he could try. In a small coffee shop next to the terminal, an old television was broadcasting a newscast that clearly showed his face, labeling him as a suspect in embezzlement. Customers in the establishment yelled insults from a distance, calling corrupt people rats. Suddenly, someone slapped him hard on the shoulder. Marcus turned and found his own uncle, face red with rage. Marcus smiled when he saw him, thinking someone would finally help him, but his uncle spat on the ground almost onto his shoes. In a loud, shaky voice, he reproached Marcus for having stained the entire family's name. He said his parents were sick and ashamed, that they didn't dare leave the house because the neighbors wouldn't stop talking about their son's crime. He forbade Marcus from coming near his parents' home if he was only going to bring more shame. He concluded by saying that, to the family, Marcus was already dead. Then he shoved him and chased him out of the place like a mangy dog. That expulsion was the final blow to his spirit. He finally understood that he was completely alone. The wife who loved him had moved on. The mistress had used and discarded him, and now his own blood was closing the door on him. That night, he went to a dark, silent park. He lay down on a cold bench with an old newspaper as his only blanket. The newspaper, ironically, carried the news of his downfall on the front page. He fell asleep surrounded by buzzing mosquitoes and thoughts of regret that were beginning to gnaw at his soul. The following days of life on the street further ravaged his body. Marcus, once robust, began to waste away to skin and bone. His face sharpened, his eyes became sunken and surrounded by dark circles. The clothes he wore, unchanged and unwashed, turned into smelly rags. A dry cough began to plague him, accompanied by a fever. He shivered from the cold, even in the sun. Every breath felt heavy, as if his lungs were full of the weight of his sins. However, amidst the illness, one obsessive thought haunted him. The old house where he had lived with me, the place where he had so cruelly thrown me out onto the street. He didn't know what force drove him, but one day, he forced himself to walk to the luxury-gated community where that house stood. The journey was long from the park where he usually slept, but he kept going as if it were a pilgrimage of penance. On the way, his mind projected scenes from the past like a defective old movie. He remembered the first years of our marriage, when we still had nothing, but I greeted him every evening with a genuine smile. He remembered the smell of my home-cooked meals, simple dishes I prepared with love, waiting for him at the table. He remembered my hands massaging his tired shoulders and my voice calming him in moments of stress. The closer he got to the community, the clearer those images became, bordering on hallucination. He finally reached the security booth. The guard looked at him with suspicion, thinking he was just a vagrant. He was about to chase him away when Marcus, in a hoarse voice, begged him to allow him to approach the house for a moment, the one that was once his, even if only from the gate. The guard, who, after a closer look, vaguely recognized the former owner, reluctantly agreed, warning him not to cause a scene. Marcus dragged his feet along the clean streets of the community until he reached the number he knew by heart. At that moment, the sky, which had been clear, covered with clouds. The first drops began to fall. He stopped in front of the gate and remained motionless, letting the rain grow into a torrential downpour. He didn't seek shelter. He clung to the cold bars of the gate, and when his strength gave out, he collapsed onto his knees on the flooded sidewalk. The rainwater mixed with his tears, running over his face and clothes. He looked at the impeccably maintained yard, the green lawn, the flowers that now occupied the spot where he had thrown my belongings. The house looked serene, elegant, oblivious to all the violence it had housed. He, in contrast, looked like a dirty ghost clinging to the gate, an intruder with no right to enter. He began to shout my name, begging for forgiveness over and over, hitting his chest, longing for a time that no longer existed. He wanted time to rewind, but he knew it was impossible. In the midst of his weeping, a pair of bright headlights illuminated him from behind. A dark car slowly approached the gate. Marcus turned, squinting to see through the curtain of rain. He recognized the car. It was mine. A thread of absurd hope crossed his heart. Maybe I would see him. Maybe I would take pity on him, seeing him so broken. Maybe I would get out with an umbrella and forgive him, as I had forgiven so many minor things before. The car stopped before the gate. Marcus tried to stand up and weakly raised a hand toward the rear window. He saw my blurred silhouette inside. The glass began to lower just a few inches. Marcus held his breath. He thought he was about to hear his name, but the window only lowered enough for me to make out who that filthy mass clinging to the gate. Upon recognizing his face, I showed no surprise or sadness. My expression was completely neutral. The window went back up until it was fully closed. The car advanced when the gate opened automatically. As it passed, a wheel hit a large puddle next to the curb. The dirty water splashed Marcus fully, covering his face and clothes with mud. He coughed, wiped his trembling hands across his face, and watched as the gate closed again, sealing the distance between the luminous interior and his darkness. I didn't get out, didn't call him. He wasn't the object of my compassion or my hate. He was simply nothing. Marcus remained alone in the rain, a miserable, muddy heap. The cold seeped into his bones. He began to tremble uncontrollably. His teeth chattered, his vision blurred, his consciousness slowly faded until he finally collapsed onto the hard pavement on the sidewalk, in front of the house he once called his own, and which was now an inaccessible fortress. When he came to, everything hurt. He was lying on a bench in the community security booth. The guard, taking pity, had dragged him there so he wouldn't die of hypothermia. But compassion had a limit. As soon as Marcus opened his eyes, the guard gestured him toward the exit with a curt movement. The residents were complaining about a vagrant's presence in the area. He escorted him to the gate and forced him back onto the street. Marcus limped away in his stiff, smelly clothes, but something had broken inside his mind. The silent refusal he had just received, my cold gaze behind the glass, had transformed his remorse into irrational rage. In his head, already impaired by fever and hunger, I was responsible for all his misfortunes. He convinced himself that I enjoyed flaunting my wealth in front of him to humiliate him. As he wandered aimlessly, he saw a huge billboard on an avenue. It advertised a charity gala organized by my family's foundation at a luxury hotel that very evening. The slogan was "Sharing love, building hope for the needy." Marcus burst into hollow, unsettling laughter. He found it ironic that I would boast about helping the needy while my ex-husband was dying of hunger on the street. A crazy idea ignited in his head. Attend the gala. He wanted to burst into the ballroom in front of all the guests, reveal the truth, and present me as a cruel wife who had abandoned her husband. He thought that by doing this, he would destroy my reputation and force my family to pay him to keep quiet. Determined, he walked toward the hotel, despite the scorching sun and his rapidly fading strength. Upon arriving, he saw that the main entrance was heavily guarded. Obviously, someone with his appearance had no chance of passing through the lobby, but Marcus knew the place well. He had organized business meetings there before. He circled the building until he reached the loading dock area. He slipped between catering boxes and carts, hid behind some soda crates when staff passed, and finally found the service corridor that led to the grand ballroom. His heart pounded wildly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of his hatred. From the side door of the ballroom, he could hear applause. The gala was in full swing. Inside, the atmosphere was majestic. Crystal chandeliers cast light on perfectly arranged tables, covered with impeccable linens and flowers. I was on the stage, standing behind a lectern. I wore a simple but impactful dress and was speaking about the importance of sincerity in giving, about the dignity of the people we helped. My words captured the attention of the attendees. Many nodded in admiration. My parents, seated in the front row, looked at me with pride. No one suspected that disaster was about to walk in from the side. Suddenly, the side door burst open. All eyes turned to the noise. There, planted in the doorway, was Marcus. An absolute contrast to the room's refinement, with matted hair, an untrimmed beard, dirty clothes, and a pervasive smell. The surprised security guards ran toward him, but Marcus was quicker. He darted through the tables and reached the stage. He snatched the microphone from the master of ceremonies, causing a sharp squeal from the speakers that made many cover their ears. "Don't be fooled by this woman. She's a hypocrite," he shouted with a broken voice, amplified by the sound system. "She pretends to be an angel, but she left her own husband to starve. I'm her husband. Look at me. Look what she did to me. While she poses as a saint, she threw me into the street like a dog. Where's your heart, Simone? This is the true face of the woman you admire. I built her company, and she and her father stole it from me with tricks." Marcus played his victim role masterfully. He let the tears flow and pounded his chest. Some guests who didn't know the story looked confused. A few even seemed to feel compassion. They whispered among themselves, wondering if there was any truth to the accusations. Marcus, seeing that hesitation, smiled. He thought he finally had me on the ropes. I took a deep breath and took a few steps back without losing my composure. I didn't scream or get hysterical. I looked at the sound technician and the screen operator and gave them a signal. The backdrop behind the stage, which had previously shown the Foundation's logo, changed. On the giant screen, a video recording began to play. The image was clear. The sound was crisp. It was the scene from the beginning of this whole story. The room fell into a deathly silence. The screen showed Marcus, well-dressed, with his arrogant demeanor, throwing an envelope in my face. His voice could be perfectly heard, yelling at me that he was fed up, that he was divorcing me, and that I should sign and disappear from his house. It then showed him stuffing my clothes into black trash bags and throwing them onto the lawn. The speakerphone call to my father could be clearly heard, with the phrase, "Come pick up this useless trash." Many of those present clenched their fists or brought their hands to their mouths, horrified. The recording continued, showing the moment Marcus, after discovering the house wasn't his, threw himself at my father's feet, begging. The contradiction between his initial arrogance and his subsequent submission was obscene. Marcus stood like stone on the stage, the color drained from his face, leaving him paler than a corpse. A corpse. He never imagined I had kept those images, much less that I would dare to project them in front of so many people. He stopped talking, unable to maintain his own lie. He looked at the audience. The glances that had doubted moments ago were now filled with revulsion. Exclamations of indignation began to be heard. "The nerve," someone murmured. "Coward," spat another voice. Some stood up, pointing at him. I turned off my microphone and walked toward him slowly, never taking my eyes off his distorted face. The entire room watched us, holding its breath. I stopped a foot away from him and leaned forward slightly. My voice was a whisper only he could hear, but every syllable cut like a razor. "Thank you for divorcing me that day, Marcus. It was the best and most wonderful thing you ever did for my life." I told him, Now enjoy your grand finale performance. This is your last stage." Then I straightened up and looked back at the security guards. This time there was no hesitation. For security men climbed onto the stage and grabbed him. Marcus tried to resist, but he had no strength left. They dragged him away, while looks and murmurs of contempt rained down from the audience. The media photographers covering the event did not miss the opportunity. The flashes illuminated his distraught face, his tears, his humiliation. They took him out through the hotel's back door and threw him next to the kitchen dumpsters among smelly black bags, exactly the place he had wanted to send me. Inside the ballroom, after a few minutes of pause, the gala resumed. Far from harming me, the incident strengthened the attendees' sympathy for me. Many rose to applaud me, not only for the Foundation's charitable work, but for the composure with which I had faced my past. Outside, among flies and stench, Marcus cried and screamed, finally understanding that his life as he knew it had ended. He had destroyed himself without anyone having to lift a finger. Not a single person in the world seemed to have compassion for him anymore. A year passed since that embarrassing episode at the gala. The wheel of fate continued to turn with cruel precision, placing everyone exactly where they deserved to be. One ordinary morning, the lobby of the same corporate high-rise that housed my family's central offices, now renovated and even more luxurious, buzzed with activity. The polished marble reflected the light of expensive lamps. Well-dressed people hurried in and out, occupied with important business. In a corner, next to one of the columns, was a figure that stood out. A skinny man in the worn blue uniform of a cleaning company was on his knees scrubbing a coffee stain from the floor with a rag. That man was Marcus. His face looked like someone much older than his age. Deep wrinkles marked his forehead. His hair, once meticulously styled, was thin and starting to gray. Nothing remained of the arrogant image of the former CEO. After being released from prison because in addition to the corruption process, he also had to face charges for the gala scandal, no one wanted to hire him for a decent position. His criminal record haunted him. With his finances ruined, his family turning their record haunted him. With his finances ruined, his family turning their backs on him, and his friends gone. The only thing he found was work as contracted cleaning personnel for a service company. The most ironic twist of fate was that this company assigned him precisely to this building. The same one he once walked through as the owner, he now trod with a cleaning supply cart. Every workday was torture for him. He had to clean the bathrooms he used to frequent with arrogance, mop the hallways where he once paraded like a king, and take out the trash from the offices where he used to send threatening emails to his subordinates. Some veteran employees still recognized him. At first, they were surprised, but over time, they got used to it and only looked at him with an indifferent mix of curiosity and pity. Marcus forced himself to swallow his pride every time someone younger, even former subordinates, scolded him because the floor was slippery or the bathroom didn't smell enough like disinfectant. That particular morning, as he scrubbed the coffee stain hard, sweat ran down his temples and his back and knees ached. Suddenly, the lobby's murmur faded and was replaced by an excited whisper. He heard synchronized footsteps approaching from the main entrance. He didn't dare lift his head. He remained focused on the floor. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes." "Good morning, sir," the receptionists and guards greeted in unison. Hearing my name, Marcus's hand trembled. The rag remained motionless, grasped between his fingers. His heart threatened to pound out of his chest. Slowly, dominated by a mixture of terror and nostalgia, he lifted his gaze just a few inches. Only a few steps away, I was crossing the lobby. I was more beautiful and radiant than ever. My face conveyed a serene happiness. I wore elegant and demure business attire. It was noticeable that I had gained a few pounds because I was pregnant. My right hand was resting on the arm gained a few pounds because I was pregnant. My right hand was resting on the arm of a tall, handsome man walking beside me. He was my new husband, a generous entrepreneur, well known for his social work. With my left hand, I held that of a small boy, an orphan whom my husband and I had just adopted. He completed the picture of a happy family. A warm energy floated around us, so warm that anyone who saw us couldn't help but smile. I laughed naturally at a joke from my husband, a fresh laugh that Marcus had never heard while he was with me. My eyes filled with tenderness as I looked at him, a gaze that Marcus, in his time, had scorned in favor of looking at another woman. Our small party advanced through the lobby toward the elevators. Marcus wanted to run away, hide behind a column, disappear, swallowed by the floor, but his legs refused to move. He hunched over even more, as if trying to become invisible. I passed so close that the tip of my designer's shoes could have brushed his uniform. He held his breath. He waited, unsure whether to fear or desire that I would stop, that I would say something, that I would at least give him a look. But I continued speaking with my husband about the details of our upcoming trip to the Holy Land. My gaze didn't deviate for a second toward the figure crouched on the floor. For me, the man mopping the floor was nothing more than part of the building's background, as relevant as a potted plant or a column. Marcus had ceased to exist. He had become a closed chapter so irrelevant that he didn't even merit a gesture of contempt. The cleaning supervisor approached right after we passed. He nudged Marcus's mop bucket with his foot. "Hey, stop zoning out," he growled. "Clean that up fast. There's another stain over there. If the floor isn't perfect, I'll deduct it from your pay." Marcus jumped. "Yes, sir." "Sorry, sir," he stammered. He plunged the rag back into the murky water of the bucket, wrung it out, and began to mop again. Back and forth, back and forth. He felt something hot fall from his eyes and mix with the dirty water, his tears. He remembered his own words spoken with such arrogance that day on the phone. "Come pick up this useless trash." That phrase had become a curse. He was now that trash. He was the waste no one wanted near, the man who cleaned up others' messes just to eat. He stayed there, pushing the mop back and forth, trapped in an endless cycle of regret. Meanwhile, high above, on the top floor, I was living a complete happiness, surrounded by authentic love, without Marcus's name ever crossing my mind again. Karma had done its work with ruthless precision, putting everyone exactly where they had earned to be. If you're hearing this, it means you stayed until the end of the story, and that says a lot about you. To know who the real warriors are who never give up, write the word karma in the comments. I want to read you. Also, tell me which part of the story impacted you the most and what you think Marcus deserves after everything he did. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and activate the bell, because even more intense stories are coming, and I don't want you to miss any.